Huh?
We're live.
We're live?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Where's the,
That works for me. We go to open first, right?
we are in open.
Yes, we're in open.
I don't have a script, but I'm gonna just make it happen.
Call
Okay.
to order. A call to order.
Call to order, call to order. It doesn't say anything there, but that's okay. It's blank. It's not there. So it does. This is what it says. It says seeing a quorum.
Oh, you're right, it's not there.
No. You're in open session. You're in open session. You call the meeting to order, you ask for a roll,
Right, that's what
and
I'm
then
doing. I'm calling us to order. Seeing a quorum of the board, I call this committee of the whole meeting to order on the 12th day of May, 2022 at 6:32 p.m. and ask for a roll call, please.
Ms. Spivey? Dr. Boharaj?
Here.
Mr. Arkin?
Here.
Mr. Henry?
Here.
Mr. Martiri?
Present.
Ms. Harris? And Mr. Costa?
Here. Okay. I move to enter closed session for the purpose of discussing appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district and independent contractors and specific volunteers, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparent Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this Act 5. Collective negotiating matters between the district and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, the placement of individual students in special educational programs and other matters related to individual students, in litigation when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, or when the district finds that an action is probable or imminent, in which cases the basis for the finding shall be recorded and entered into the closed meeting minutes. May we please take a roll call, please? Oh, thank you.
Anybody second?
I'll second. Thank you.
Roll call. Dr. Boharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Arkin?
Yes.
Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Mr. Martiri?
Yes.
Ms. Harris? Ms. Spivey? And Mr. Costa?
Yes. So we will now depart out of this Zoom and into closed session. So see you there.
It should have been about 5.
Ready? Okay, next, we're resuming open session, committee of the whole, and next is visitor comments. Lisa, there are no,
We have no in-person visitor comments. We have no visitor comments via Zoom. I have 2 to be read into the minutes.
okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I move to approve the April 14, 2022 committee of the whole meeting minutes. Do I have a second? Does anyone have any issues, comments, or in favor? Please, all in favor? Aye. Voice vote, right?
Roll call.
A roll call? Okay. Roll call, please.
Voice.
What?
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. So you can do voice vote, voice say all.
All in favor?
Aye.
And anyone opposed? It passes. We move to the financial portion of the agenda. Dr. Johnson, are you gonna take the ball? I would only, there's a number of these that are kind of similar, and so I would bundle them because they have common themes.
Absolutely. So we have several of these that have a common theme that we can bundle, and we don't really have much by way of presentation with any of it. In fact, I think the only one that would be something we want to introduce a little bit is for the first one, our youth engagement IGA, intergovernmental agreement with the Oak Park Township. And I think we have folks here who want to come up and talk about this briefly. It's there are some changes to this partnership, and so feel free to come up, please. Yeah. This is a of the contract we've had before, and it moves that along for the next 2 years. And you can see that the cost changes, the slight cost changes associated with that. But there's also a significant name change and a philosophical change that goes along with that name change that I know you all want to speak to. So I'll turn it over to our 2 guests here, and they'll be able to give us a little bit more information. So please take it away.
Services for Oak Park and River Forest Townships. So much.
The Brown of the Youth Engagement Manager.
And you know what? I think also, I apologize. There actually is a second attachment, Ed. If you could just put that on the screen, there's just a few slides I think that need an introduction.
Okay, I'll bring it up.
Thank you, sir.
So as Dr. Johnson stated, this is a renewal of the what was formerly known as the Youth Interventionist Program. We decided to change the name this year to the Youth Engagement Program because it encompasses more of the direction that we're going with the program, which is focusing on the mental health needs of the youth in the communities. Over the past 3 years, I started in 2019, so over the past 3 years, I've seen an increased need for mental health services. There's been, especially through the pandemic, long wait lists at all of our partner agencies. So we really wanted to kind of switch up the focus of the program. In the past, the program did focus a lot on almost kind of gang intervention, which when it was started in 1996, that was definitely a need in the community. But now through the pandemic, we've seen the focus shift. So we wanted to make sure that the community knew what we were available to and that we're open to see all types of kids, not just kids who were involved in gang violence. So I'm going to kind of let Jonathan talk about what the engagement program is now going to do.
So our engagement program is actually transitioned over to 3 different umbrellas. The first one, as Megan introduced, is mental health, which will stay as our main priority for our program. So majority of the caseload numbers that we will see and continue to see will remain with individual counseling, which we do in the schools. Faith has been very gracious to even offer up her office sometimes to us. So we are seeing our kids on a weekly basis here. We're seeing about roughly between 8 and 12 clients right now, actually here at Oak Park River Forest High School. Some of them are being seen via telehealth. Some are seen here at the school and some are being seen at the township. The second umbrella that we're moving into is also mentoring. That's more of a 12-week short-term program that we're starting in the fall. That program will encompass the kids who don't necessarily need mental health services, but just need kind of an extra boost, whether teachers, social workers, counselors, community members are seeing things with financial literacy, decision-making skills, just life skills, especially coming out this pandemic. kind of relearning and readjusting the current social skills and learning the new social skills and norms. And then finally, we're doing a community outreach umbrella, which is going to be kind of twofold. One being where we will provide trainings to our IGA partners. If the school reaches out to us and say, hey, we need racial training, we need cyberbullying trainings, any of those type of trainings, my staff, which we are all master's level social workers, will create a program and come into the schools and do that, as well as being just a support to our school. So if there's ever a crisis or anything like that, we will be on hand to help and assist in any way needed. Also, what Megan said, excuse me, we are also having a short-term intervention with our mental health. As Megan said, our partners like such as Thrive has like long wait lists. And so we are partnering with them where we'll do short-term treatment with the clients to try to prepare them for Thrive and then also get consent signed to move forward with that. So essentially, we still want to be in the schools, but our focus is shifting more to mental health to assist our culture and climate teams, to assist the social worker teams with any needs that we can be available to.
Any questions? Okay.
Thank you for your service. I'm familiar with your work. I think you guys do a good job.
Thank you.
I have one quick question. You mentioned Thrive. Is that Thrive Counseling Center that's Mary? Is
Yes.
that the only partner you have?
No.
No, that's just the one that has like probably the most common wait list for the kids that are being serviced in Oak Park and River Forest. Most of them go to Thrive for psychiatric services. And I think when probably around January, when I reached out to them, the wait list was about 7 months.
So, do you
So
have
we
any
came
other-
in just to kind of do that intermediate work with them.
So you have other centers in case when you decide, right?
Yes, but
Pillars.
but we use Rush. It's the wait lists everywhere, especially for adolescents, are just enormously long. So it's not just Thrive,
Yeah.
but and two, we try to use agencies that are close where our kids and our families can actually get to. So that's why Thrive is used most often.
I'll just jump in to say I think this was a really smart move. And I really, the need is so tremendous right now for the mental health work. So I really appreciate that you're doing this.
Thank you.
We'll be bringing this back to the board in 2 weeks for approval of the idea.
Thank you so much. Yes,
All right, so the next,
please.
really, the next 6 items are all going to come to the board in 2 weeks for approval. These are continuation of contracts that we already have in place this school year. And I think taking your lead on this, Tom, if we bundle those together and see if the board has any questions about any one of them individually, we'd be happy to do that. Or tease them apart, but we don't have a separate presentation for them. They all are support services for our special education program, and our executive director of special education is Francois, who is here to respond to any questions.
I do know there were some written comments and they're, from my memory, they're carryover questions. So the ask is that the legal review of these contracts from a standardization, there was some good input that I would expect be addressed when they return.
Yeah, there are some changes to the contracts that we anticipate before we bring them back to the board. So yes, appreciate it.
Yes, Fred,
Yeah, I have some specific questions on one of the contracts.
please.
All right, on G, the board certified behavior analysis contract with this. Is this a new contract?
This was presented last in very, very early fall and like kind of late spring, where we presented to the board the opportunity to contractual service for board certified behaviors to work closely with our clinicians and also with private providers to support students with significant mental health needs and social emotional needs.
Okay, so we have been we've been doing this, we've had this on
this year.
this year.
This is a renewal.
Okay, this is a renewal, and is there any kind of data or progress report as to what work has been done? And
Yeah,
I mean, I had, this is so far out of my range of understanding. I'd like to get an idea of exactly what they do. You know, how much, what students they serve. You know, how much work is being done and what kind of work is being done.
So it actually comes at perfect timing because today we're working with Ms. Sullivan, our Executive Director of Communications. Part of our Equity and Excellence articles that we have put out today was the on the Bridge Therapeutic Intervention Model. And that model is overseen by the board certified behavior analysts, where it is in-district support of providing therapeutic milieu and intervention therapy to students in-house. When we presented the role last year, late spring, early fall, we approached it from the standpoint of expanding our special education continuing services to really meet the needs of our students on campus, instead of sending them away from campus to receive extensive mental health support, social emotional support. So the role of the behavior board certified behavior analyst is to oversee that bridge therapeutic intervention model, where students are provided with a therapeutic milieu, working on using a therapeutic intervention approach called ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and where students can self-refer or be referred by staff to come into that space and process through some pretty significant feelings that we have seen when they cannot be regulated during the school day. So it equips them with tools on how to remain within the classroom environment or to come out and receive support or return to the learning environment to sustain the day. They also work closely with other providers, such as other clinicians, our substance person in student services, Ms. Ginger Bencola. They also work with parents and other private providers to provide more of a wrap-around approach to supporting the student in the school district.
Is this I mean, how many hours? Is this full-time position or part-time position?
Started
What?
3 days a week and increase that to 5 days a week, depending on the need.
3 to 5 days a week, where, I mean, I'm assuming that, because anecdotally, we all know that our kids have a lot of needs these days. Everything they've been through, I'm assuming there's been mostly 5 days a week.
Yes.
This person started last
Yes.
fall.
Yep, 5 days a week.
Contract started last fall?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so it's been, so then my question is, all right, you know, I'd like to see a report and see results, but also to be paying $105 an hour, all right, on a contract with where somebody's working a full-time job isn't making a lot of sense to me. You know, if this is a specific need, why isn't this something that we are handling, you know, in-house employment arrangement? And you know, the other big concern I have, and I voiced this concern when we spoke about the instructional coaches, especially, is I think it's a very dangerous precedent to use grant money, and we're having ESSER funds going to pay for this person. We either have it in our budget or we don't. And I think that, you know, I mean, grant funds are always there. I don't think there are, I'm gonna guess these grant funds can be spent on a variety of different programming and supports. And it's not just, you know, directed to hiring a behavioral analyst.
Can I actually speak to that? The IDEA grant is for services like this. There is a function code and a budget code for contractual services, specifically for specialized intervention and therapy or services to provide mental or social emotional health. There is actual budget code for that, as well as instructional improvements for students that are diverse learners by specialized educators such as coaches. So the grant actually is made to do things just what we're doing.
But my point is, there's never a guarantee with a grant that grant is gonna go on forever.
Well, the IDA
Okay.
grant is federal, so this can live in the grant for a number of years.
Right, but at any time the federal government shrugs its shoulders, it's possible to lose the grant, right?
There's no way we would lose the federal dollars of the individualized education now. It's a
I'm
federal grant
just
for special ed.
Saying that if this is a part of our structure, it should be a part of our structure.
Sure, I think the overarching point that we made before, when we were talking about, the use of other categorical grants like this is that, if this is a permanent position and we want this in the district for the long haul, this should be something that we pay for out of our own, budget. But as to the point, is any risk of this grant going away in the long term? This grant, just like our Title I, Title II grants and so on. The question is, how does it rise, shrink, and what effect that would have on the services? So, those things could shift over time, but disappearing. But regardless, the overarching point that it should be part of our budget.
Right, I going back to one of my first statements, I'd like to see a report of the progress of the students that have, the types of students that have been seen and worked with, how they're doing, what kind of special needs they have, and the number of hours that we've utilized this program. Looking at the other contracts, the other contracts tell us how much money was spent to date. And this one doesn't. So we don't have that information, and I think that's critical for making a decision.
We actually can provide that pretty easily too, because the program model is structured where the number of students that we see per day, what they're seeing for, and how long they're receiving that services, we'll track that. That is the full implementation that resumes in the fall. Then we'll also be able to see trend data where if we're seeing more males, if we're seeing more females, if it's time of day, we can provide that. The other thing that probably be helpful context is that when I came into the district, last year, we were spending in excess of $45 million on off-campus placement. Since I've been here and been expanding our special ed continuum, we have reduced that cost by over 20%. And I'm only going on the conclusion by second year.
We're spending $45 million.
We were spending over $45 million on off-campus placement. We are down now.
Is that over what period of time?
That was over just from 2019 up to date. Now we're down over 20%.
So that's over a 3-year period?
From 2019 now to 2021-22. It has been a reduction in cost and spending and off-campus placement by over 20%. In order to reduce that cost, we had to expand our continuum of services. That requires the infrastructure of staffing, that requires the infrastructure of programming, that requires the infrastructure of analysis of what works best for students academically and functionally. So in order for us to stay within this trajectory of serving kids with complex needs, comorbid needs, we have to build structure to serve them.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, I thoroughly believe that our students need these, have these needs. They need the therapeutic services. I just think we need to understand and have an assessment that number of $45 million to me, as I understand, is out of building placement is mind-boggling. And so, I think we need to take to have a greater understanding.
So what we can do is, so I hear a few kind of common ideas popping up throughout this. The students that we've seen, as Francois Boo has talked about, specifically identifying who these students are, males, females, so on and so forth. Number of hours we've utilized for this program, services these kids have received as a result of this position, money to date, and then we'll take a look at this $45 million number and try to report that out and see where it's at. So that's good.
We just should verify it.
Absolutely.
So that there's no.
Yes. We'll be able to-
Good. The one thing I was gonna ask, and not necessarily for this round of contracts, but going forward, we had passed the policy a year or so ago about whenever contracts are coming up for renewal, that the staff would be telling us why they're renewing it, what their rubrics were for evaluating the contract. But remember all that, we have a procedure. So this was the year that was supposed to start to be implemented. Now, it hasn't been implemented yet because it's a new procedure. But maybe the next set of contracts that could be implemented and we could start getting it. Because I think, Fred, that would have answered all your questions. Because the
Probably, yeah.
rubrics would have all been there.
Yes, it's fair.
And this was one of the things we had discussed doing when we passed, we worked it out collaboratively with the administration, but I think it'd be helpful, and I don't think there's time to do it for this set of contracts. But for the next set that comes up, that might be a good place to start.
That's good. That's fair.
And maybe on Fred's question, maybe if you would, and I don't know if you would have this information, but if you would know the difference between what it would cost to hire an individual full-time to perform these services versus what we pay on a contract basis. So we would just know that.
Yeah.
If you have.
No, we have that.
Well, and that's been a discussion that we've had that, should always be part of it is whether we're better, using outside or inside resources. And there are multiple reasons why. So, okay. Did you get what you needed for that?
Yep.
I don't see
here. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions, so I think we can move to, thank you. H.
Yeah, so this is the authorization of project authorization 7 from FGM. This is for our work that was first communicated to the board at but most recently, I should say, the 10-year maintenance plan that we presented last 2 meetings. So I don't know, actually, Ron, if you or any of our representatives here at FGM would share. But the memo really just outlines what that work is, as you saw outlined in the 10-year maintenance plan, and costs and the fee structure associated with this. So I don't know if the team has anything else they want to say by way of introduction, otherwise we can open up to questions.
We go over a couple of questions. Only thing I wanted to make sure.
Put the mic a little closer.
The only thing I wanted to make sure that everyone understood was this is the work that's on the 10-year maintenance plan slated for fiscal year 2024. It's being done in 2023 summer, but that's fiscal year 2024. So I know some people had questions about it being listed as 2024 on the 10-year maintenance plan, but those are fiscal year. It's the summer before that fiscal year.
If I could just re-ask the question, because I read the answer I got and I didn't quite understand the answer I got, so I'm just going to ask the question again. So the fee structure, I understand is a fluctuating fee structure predicated on the dollar value of the project that is that issue. And my question was, why, given the long-standing relationship we have and the fact that you're doing all this work, why isn't it possible to aggregate all the work you're doing and get a lower fee structure? Because any given project might be at an 8% fee, but if you aggregated all the projects, we qualify for a 7 or 6.5, whatever it is. And so that I didn't understand it. Greg, you gave me a response. I read it twice and I didn't quite understand the response. So I apologize for asking this question again. He did respond to me and it was great. So
I understood it, I just didn't like it. And I think it's a real question, which is yesterday, right? We approved an expenditure that by aggregating, we get this rate. And now this is not part of aggregation. And
And we get a higher.
it's a bit peculiar to me. So,
If I may? Okay, so I believe we communicated with you and showed you what the quote unquote standard fee schedule was, would look like. And fees that we provide to the school district are significantly lower than what we do with other clients. One, because we're a great client, one, because it's the quantity of work we're doing for the district. The reason that everything isn't aggregated together is because projects that go together and are part of the same set of bidding would be aggregated. Projects that run separately and require separate sets of bid documents and have different schedules, and therefore, for example, construction administration doesn't happen at the same time as the other projects, requires a different fee.
And also, if I may, with the project two work that we will be doing will occupy the efforts of an entire team. And this work, and should we move forward with track and field work, would require additional staff being assigned to these separate projects, because as Jim indicated, they'll be running concurrently and will be a more condensed schedule, a faster pace set of work that needs to go out. So we would be assigning additional staff to OPR projects specific to these on top of what we have already assigned for project two.
So I get that. So are you saying you could hire additional staff or just reallocate the staff you currently have?
We would not be hiring new staff, we would be assigning staff from within our current, but we would be allocating their time to these projects as opposed to other projects.
So your foregoing is, I guess, opportunity cost, what you're saying, you're foregoing other clients to do this work for us for this project thing, right?
We are scheduling our staff that way, should we need to hire, which we actually constantly hire right now with the current climate of construction climate and what's going on. But this, we would be allocating dedicated staff member time to these specific projects.
Right, so it's opportunity cost, right? Because you're
Essentially, I guess that's.
yeah, just trying to get us a bit direct. So you're basically saying, if you're foregoing other opportunities, different clients need to charge us more.
And that staff would be billing, their time would be being billed to these projects, and that, so yes, that's where they're.
And these are more like construction project managers, superintendents, foremen, is that what you're allocating for the construction phase of it?
I would be the project manager that's on all OPR, no matter what we do.
So you're like the program,
That's
so
me,
kind of
but
like the
then I
program manager,
have
right?
different project architects
Okay.
and project, and younger staff, you know, the lower level production staff, and we also have consultant fees that we pay for this that are separate and above and beyond what we would pay consultants for their work on project two. So
So I think the answer really is they give foregoing opportunities. They charge more. That's really the essence of what you're saying, right? I like this big plainly, just kind of just get what
Yeah,
you're saying. Yeah, okay. So I guess so you're kind of the program manager of all the projects, sub-projects that open. So this one, project two or phase two, whatever you want to call it, in track, right? And you set underneath me, right? And none of those PMs can actually cross-manage projects at the same time. Right? So if you're doing phase two, you also could not do a roofing project or masonry project.
There is a certain amount of time that is allocated for staff that are working on project two. It may or may not, depending on the Contracts Act, be a full-time allocation, but that would, the remaining time would be make them available to do other work. If they get assigned to do this work, then that would be in lieu of them working on another separate project for different clients.
Yeah, I want to clarify one thing. It's not that we're charging the district more for the same project than doing that project for a different district. And in fact, we are charging for park workforce less for the same project that we might be doing for different districts.
Understood. I didn't think you were
Okay,
approaching
just.
But just in relation to project two, percentages, and that's what I was.
Yes, it's got to do with project size.
Right.
And the way that you can officially employ staff across all the projects with things that are not running on the same schedule and require the preparation of separate sets of bid documents and separate activities for construction administration during.
But if this was included in project two, we would have it at the lower rate.
Correct. It was exactly part of project two.
If it wasn't a separate set of documents that had to be have an entirely separate effort to produce them, we did look at, and our intention originally was to bring this and the track and field work together at the rate that we're putting this forward at, and when we broke them up, our intention is to bring them both forward at this fee rate, which is what would have been, which is where normally this, the roofing work would be at a 8.5% to 9% fee rate. But when you combine, when you look at the two projects which would run concurrently, because the roofing effort we plan to put out to bid immediately before we would begin the effort on the track and fields, we looked at this as that as aggregate. Those two projects together, what would be normally be for those in aggregate, and that's what we're presenting, and what we intended to present for track and field as well, when that comes forward.
Please.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The first one's straightforward and simple. Is there, in the scope of this work, is there any overlap between this and any of the elements of project two?
For the roofing, no, there is not.
The second question I have has to do with construction administration versus construction management. And so 20% of your fee is dedicated towards construction administration. Okay, so what are construction administration services versus what we would have a construction manager?
The construction manager is managing all of the construction contracts and those subcontractors. The architect's construction administration services are, we provide, we have a dedicated staff member, Kyle Kim, who is out here every week and managing all of these submittals, the architect's response to submittals, RFIs, all of the response, requests for information that come from the contractors. He's out on site every week doing a construction observation report and ensuring that construction is built based on the drawings that we provided. He answers any questions that the contractor has related to unforeseen conditions that come up and works with coordinates our consultants in getting those responses. So he actually has probably about a 24 to 30 hour a week job on just overseeing construction administration. You also get my services with my knowledge from the beginning of the project all the way through substantial completion in ensuring that during construction administration, the architect serves as a level of protection for the owner and ensuring that the owner's interests are protected and that the project proceeds as it was intended to be.
So we have an in-house construction manager. And so he will be setting up the bid process and directing me. And this will go through him, I'm assuming. He'll set up and our views.
Are you referring to Pepper Construction or are you referring to Jeff?
Jeff.
Yes, Jeff.
Jeff, the construction manager Pepper is the one that sets up the bid process and sets up the and coordinates all of the construction contracts and those items. Jeff is essentially the district's boots on the grounds every day, protecting the district's interests.
So this is where I have a problem. And we discuss. We went away from a process of having a outsource construction management firm many years ago. That's when we hired Jeff's position for purposes of the project, who was an in-house construction manager for the maintenance plan, et cetera, and the capital projects. It's my understanding that the hiring of Pepper as a construction manager was strictly, or they were strictly hired for project one. And if they have not been hired as a construction manager for other projects, or not approved by the board as a construction manager for other projects. So my question is, when do we go away from we created a position, we hired an individual, and then I think that man retired, and Jeff took his place to be our construction manager. And that went on for a very long time, all the way up until the point where we started project one. So my question is, and this is an administrative question, is, where do we stand on this process? Because the only approval that I know of, unless it was just done in a meeting that I'm not aware of Pepper as a construction management firm, was strictly for a project. I may be mistaken, I might have missed something in the meeting at some point in time where something different is passed. I don't have that.
It's my understanding that Pepper their contract is 21 through 23. I don't think it was job specific on which exact job it is, but they're 21 through 23, and Jeff role, as you should call him a owner's rep. Every Monday they have a meeting called the OAC meetings, the owner, architect, construction manager. That's when they go over all of the things going on with the project.
But it seems to me our owner's rep is sitting right there. Are the architects? That's what she just explained to me. Kind of their role was really, and she basically said it, that protecting our interests.
She protects our interests, but Jeff is the person who's boots on the ground.
I understand that.
He's the one that's going around making sure punch list items, finding punch list items. Anything that goes wrong, he's looking out for the best interest of the district. So say, for instance, they paint the wall out here in the hallway. He's the one that goes and finds a crack in it to make sure that it gets done.
Yeah, my concern is that we left this stand kind of a regular system of having an architecture firm and a construction management firm or general contracting firm, I'll call it, and hire an in-house construction manager for these kind of projects. And it seems like we're double paying for this type of service. And that's my concern. And so I think it's something that needs to be explored.
But don't forget that Jeff, he's not only on project one. He bids out asbestos abatement. They have nothing to do with that.
And that was my point. That was my first question. Is Jeff the one who's going to go out and do these bids and bid these projects out and act as our construction management?
No.
And that's all I want.
So I have the same recollection as Fred, which is, and so what I think the ask is to go back to, because we had Henry Brothers was our prior construction manager. And there was a process the board went through to hire, where the administration went through to hire for annual construction work, not for big project work. So I think that needs to be revisited. And if we're not following that, what that was done, because there was economic justification, et cetera, we need to look at that, is the ask to make sure, because we're kind of getting it done.
Yeah, I'm not personally too aware of that history. And maybe Ron, that precedes you too, but we'll go back. We'll try to figure out what the purpose was of making this the bed before and see what we could do. What I hear is a concern that we're basically possibly, if somebody hired internally to do work, that we're bringing somebody on the outside to do, thereby duplicating the expenditure.
The rationale was when we did project one, because the scope was a different scope. It was more than that person was hired for. But this is, this is kind of not inconsistent. I think that's, and the other thing I'm hearing, I don't know, I don't see any other, are there any other questions? Okay. But what I'm hearing is that, because I had asked previously if the, what are we calling it, the track work? Is that what we're calling it? Was bundled with project 2 and was told no. And now I'm hearing it's bundled with this, so it was.
But then it's not.
It was, the response that I had given to that question last month was that the track work cannot be bundled with project 2 because the time frame in which you would need to make a decision and move forward with the documents for the track project is in advance of when you would be making funding decisions about project 2. So that work would have to be completed and bid before you decide if you're moving forward with project 2. Whereas with regard to the roofing and track work, that the roofing is being brought forward at this time because of long lead time concerns related to roofing materials. And so we would be putting together documents and then immediately moving into putting together documents for the tracking. So that work could be bundled together. It's being brought to you now to move the roofing forward more quickly so that we can, in recognition of the concerns for long lead times, that the schedule could still be met for roofing.
But bundled in fee structure, it's not being bundled with project 2, it's being bundled with this, is what I've heard.
Correct, because it's on the same schedule.
Which is
It's a schedule issue, quite frankly. One set of work needs to be completed in a certain set of time so that you have the track available when you want it. And project 2 has a separate independent time schedule, which beyond schematic design at this point, we don't know what that's.
Are there any further questions? I don't, let's make sure hand raised. I don't see.
I have a clarifying question for
Anyone,
if I can. Is that right?
please, yeah, I'm just checking to see if anyone else.
So there's 2 questions here, and I don't know if they're, the question we're on regarding construction management is really more specific to how the building itself is kind of organized and how it utilizes its resources. Is that distinct from authorization 7? I bring that up because I want to figure out how I'm going to answer this question to the board and bring it back. So in 2 weeks right now, when we bring authorization 7 back to the board, is that the point at which that question regarding our director of construction needs to be kind of packaged and responded to? Or is that a separate item for the board?
I would think it's part of that. I mean, just because the structure is that we're paying for this service and our other services. Are we or are we not?
Okay, got it.
Is that anyone?
Yeah, because as I heard it when you mentioned is Jeff. His job is to go and do punch items. And
Not just punches.
right, there's punch items in the field, and he's gonna.
And he also beats out things as well. He just don't beat out the big projects. They don't beat out our asbestos abatement and that type of stuff.
Right.
Jeff, we do that in-house, and that's Jeff who bids out asbestos abatement. And as you know, every project has asbestos abatement. So he's actually bidding things out that's associated with project 1, but they're not considered a project 1 because they're capital improvements. So they're tied together. Like say, there's project 1 to be a classroom being demoed and redesigned and redone. But first you have to be asbestos abatement. Jeff bids that out, and then the architects take over from there. So there's steps of things that need to be done, and because of liability issues, architects and construction managers, they don't beat out the asbestos abatement portions of it.
I guess my question would be this, more for you, I guess, and Jeff. The amount of work he's doing, punch items, spitting out, managing, is one person enough for all this? And can we have more than one person now for all the need for peppers? Would that be cheaper? We had a second.
I don't understand the question.
Well, if Jeff is doing all of that, and we have Pepper's same amount of duplicated work, is that kind of the, or some firms Pepper duplicated work? Is it cheaper to have a second person, like a Jeff Part Two, or someone else to actually help him with that, as opposed to paying outside firm to help out? Or is he staffed accordingly enough to do his job, or he help?
No,
Supposed to pay the firm, or you need a second body?
Are you talking about Jeff compared to Pepper?
Well, so you have Jeff and you have Pepper, like, I think the question already duplicating, right? Is Jeff as the one person enough, or do you need a second person? Would it be cheaper to have another person helping out, being a CM or foreman, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to having Pepper come in and expand certified help out, right? Are you not following or no?
So, yeah, the question, I think, as I understand it, right, Kareem, is would it be, if we forego Pepper for this authorization, would it be cheaper, more economic for the district to have like kind of an assistant for Jeff
Exactly.
in-house?
Right, that's a really good question.
That's,
But I would just say that, I think it's a good question. That was the question that was asked when we first hired Jeff, right? Which is, do we want to bring this work in-house? And so I think the ask, are you clear on it? The ask is, and you know, and there's a lot of, there's two long memory folks here, right? And a bunch of people that weren't around at that time. So revisit the archives and say, this is what we said we did, and then has the game played out the way we said the game was gonna play out? If not, what's happened that has put us where we are, and then what's the best path forward? But I think we've got to start with that decision, which was on October 22nd, 2015, I believe.
it's very impressive.
That's good.
You know, confidence is better than, no, it was around 2015 is what I'm thinking.
All right, we'll take a look. Yeah, you're fine. Okay, thank you. Thank you. The next item up is, don't go anywhere.
You guys are supposed to work.
Yeah, don't go anywhere, Ron. Next up is external bidding for our security services, our annual contract. So, Ron,
We currently have Securitex as our security consultant. They handle the third shifts, the holidays, the special events, those type of things. They currently have a 1-year contract. And so it was time to rebid. So we're bringing back a 3-year contract so we can lock in those rates that they've been coming back with. And multiple companies attended the pre-bid meeting, but only 2 submitted sealed bids. And Securitex had the lowest bid, and the district has been working with them a number of years. So their first year is exactly the same as the last 3 years and of hourly rate. And we also use them on an as-needed basis as well when we're short on security staff. We've been having a number of call-offs and a number of security staff off in special events. So for instance, we had COVID clinics and that type of stuff. When we have those and we need extra help, we call on the company to give us some outside help when the nighttime security don't want to work overtime, something like that. And we're paying a flat rate at that point versus a time and a half rate. So this is for a 3-year contract versus a 1-year contract. Any questions?
How they performing?
They've been performing pretty good.
So to the root question is what we have to start
Exactly.
implementing.
I just asked the question, well, time set.
that's, there's some clear around.
It was a good ask. Any other questions on the, I see there no hands up, so if you have questions, I'm looking for raised hands.
I have a question.
Oh, Sarah?
Yeah, so Ron, I think we went through this before, but I just want to make sure I'm remembering this correctly. So these security guards are outside the building, right, doing external sweeps and have limited to no interaction with students, is that right?
They currently do, but the new contract requires them to have a certain amount of security staff trained by our security staff and our trainers so that they can be prepared if we need more security on the inside of the building.
Okay.
So they'll be properly trained before they have interaction with kids.
And in light of the fact that we will be having a new director of security soon, has any of this been run by the new person? I mean, do we know if this fits with plans that might be forthcoming?
Actually, some of these questions were asked on the interview process and they were answered.
Sir.
Yes.
Seeing no further questions, I believe that concludes the finance and moves us into the instruction.
Yeah, we have 2 items for instruction today, both of which are very similar. Approval of instructional materials, which are more consumables, novels, and things like that. And the second item is textbook adoption, which is traditional textbooks. And here to present that information and do a quick introduction is Dr. Henry.
Yes, so in the document that I shared through Boardocs, there's a list of all the textbooks that are being requested to be adopted. Receiving that approval from the Board of Education on the next regular board meeting. Any questions? Variance?
Sorry, I had a quick comment, which is just that I was really pleased to see 2 particular books on this list. Octavia Butler's Dawn, which I teach and my students love. It just goes over really well, and it's such an interesting and challenging book. She's probably one of my 5 favorite authors in the world, so I'm delighted that you guys are teaching her. And I was really surprised and pleased to see Keith Slaymon's Heavy, which is a new book, really interesting, so apropos to the moment. So, and I think will be of interest to a lot of our students. So anyway, I just, good job on those 2. So.
Thank you, Mary. Any others? Okay, I think we're good.
Thanks, Lloyd.
You don't need the textbooks.
Oh, textbooks, excuse me, sorry, go ahead. My apologies.
We are seeking approval at the regular board meeting for the attached adoption of the attached textbooks. I would like to indicate that there is an error, and I apologize. For the textbook Psychology in Your Life, 3rd edition, I have listed that the cost is $27,000. It's $16,100. So
You can make that kind of error anytime.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I just saved the district money right there. How fast. Right, Tom? Yeah, that worked. And then we have our AP environmental science textbook, which is the result of the curriculum. Any questions?
Not that I'm aware of.
Very good, thank you.
All right.
And last on our list, if I can jump over, is safety and security procedures. This is really a direct response to the incident we had last week, just to kind of highlight some of the safety and security procedures that we've had in place and how we are looking to improve on those as we move forward. From here on out. And so if I could have Ms. Parker, Principal Parker, come on up. Our Director of Student Services, Faith Cole, please come up. Since our last board meeting, I should say Dr. Cole. Congratulations there. And if she's able to navigate her way in, I think Ms. Bishop is try to join us. We don't have much by way of introduction for this item. This is really for the board to have a conversation about the topic. The memo that you see here is exactly what we communicated out after an internal review and investigation to our process to respond to the last incident that we had on the unfortunate incident we had on May 3rd. And this really is, the findings that we saw as a result of that conversation, the process that we will be going through the next several weeks to continue to review and refine our approach to such unfortunate events is ongoing for forever, really. I mean, we will always be reviewing our process. So with that said, I think I'll open it up for discussion. Questions. And the team is here to field questions as the board might have. If any.
Sarah's hand is up.
Okay.
So I have a handful of questions that they're not to be answered tonight, I don't think, but on more than one occasion, I have encountered the smell of cannabis in our halls. And so I do have concerns and I mean, I'm not really sure how to manage it. I have no suggestions. I'm not here suggesting that anyone's doing anything wrong, but I think that the vaping and the cannabis use is something that seems to be higher than I've ever seen at this school. And so I'm very interested in how we're addressing students' addiction issues. How we can support those students if we need more resources or more options for them, perhaps. I know it's not easy. And with vaping, it's sometimes hard to detect, et cetera. So I'm curious to know more about that and how we're kind of trying to manage that. And the other thing that I've heard about, and tonight a student that I know was involved in an incident at the library where a parent of a student who was not a high school student, for example, got into a fight, and the parent was sort of like abetting and aiding this beat down of this other student in a way that's really like not something I've ever seen before. But I've heard of this year more than I've heard of it in prior years, right? So influences from outside the school, not necessarily inside the building, but around, adjacent, whether it's out front or maybe over at Ridgeland. It seems to be a much, all anecdotal. This is not like real data, so if I'm wrong, please tell me. But it seems like we have more parents, more grown-ups, more people coming from off campus to cause problems than I've ever heard of, certainly. So that is super I just don't know what to do about these things, right? And the last thing I'm curious in knowing more about as time goes on, again, not for tonight, is how are we, what percentage of students who are struggling right now and who are having these infractions are special ed students? And what supports are they being provided? Are we seeing, more special ed students struggling this year than in previous years, or sort of what those numbers look like? And making sure that we're really giving special needs kids the supports that they need to be able to cope in what is arguably an incredibly stressful environment for those of us with decent coping skills. And what, if any, role that may be playing in some of what we're seeing here. So.
Do you want me to answer, or do you want?
And really, not even for tonight, right? Those are just.
Yeah, some of those just need data to support like what's truly happening, but as Faith was about to mention, there are some things that are going on in terms of like the addiction issues and our partnership with Rose Grants, but we can put that all together.
That'd be great.
Right. Yeah, just to talk a little bit about, I'm not gonna get into too much in specifics about the incident the other day with the kid who was proximity campus.
Right.
Never got in the building, as I understand. What really concerns me has to do with our protocols and communication with the police department. It seems something doesn't ring right when a call goes to the police and then they're contacting one of our deans. I mean, I would have thought that we had a standard protocol that if they got that kind of an information that a student is headed to school with a weapon, that there would have been a call from someone very high up in the police department, chief or deputy chief, to our building leadership. Okay, not to a specific dean who a specific officer may have had a relationship with. And then how that response works going downhill. And I'm not gonna look at the timeline or anything. I think they probably did a fantastic job. It seems like their response was almost immediate. But I'm very concerned on our communication, our communication channels. Because if there is a threat to the building, and the police get that threat before we do, they have knowledge and an understanding of it before we do. There have to be designated people here that it is immediately reported to, and then we should have our internal protocols on what we do depending on what that threat may be.
Yeah.
And I'm really I'll be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that has not been the system. And I remember going with going to a convention, for a security convention, a former director of security. These are the kind of things that were talked about there. Just seem like it's something that everybody does.
Linda, let me try to respond first.
Okay.
Is it okay? And
Yeah.
I just want to say this, and then I know you have things that you want to respond to as well. So, thank you for raising that question. I think that we have a few things we can share out. First, I just want to point out regarding this incident, the communication channel that was utilized, however informal it may have been, was effective as far as efficiency and speed is concerned. There was quick communication with someone in the building who was able to immediately follow the steps that were recommended. Now, I agree. I think some sort of formalized protocol and relationship is warranted, and we need to find a way to do that. What has been inadvertent kind of consequence of the conversation this board had over a year ago regarding the school resource officer is the existing intergovernmental agreement between our public bodies. It was vacated as a result of that. And that is the intergovernmental agreement that defined those communication channels. And so we've had conversations going back over a year ago with Oak Park Police, who have continued to be very open and collaborative and good partners with us along the way. And there are a number of ongoing relationships that folks over there have developed with people in this building. And I'm going to point out Janelle Bishop right off the bat as one person who knows folks over there and has been a very good liaison back and forth. But the communication channel that's official as far as us going to the police department without that IGA in place is really 911. When we regardless of whether we would categorize it as an actual emergency, 911 really is the way to go if we're looking for some sort of support. Now, I know that we've had conversations, I've been part of conversations throughout this past school year regarding an intergovernmental agreement. Those conversations are ongoing just this past week, but well before this week, 2 weeks ago, and before that with the new village manager, Kevin Jackson, we've been able to have conversations about renewing and finalizing the intergovernmental agreement between our two entities that would formalize those communication chains, as well as do accomplish a few other goals as well. So it's just not done yet, but those are things that absolutely are a priority for us, and we do want to move forward.
This may be a bit of a unique situation because it was the police who received the information and the threat before we did. Rather than someone coming, reporting it to an administrator that they think there might be a child, on their way to school or gone. So, I mean, it was kind of, the other question is, in our internal responses to these things, I know decisions have to be made.
Yep.
Okay, and I know that the conditions in the building change throughout the day. All right, and I understand that, especially now that we have open lunch, primarily because of COVID, all right, it may be problematic, you know, we need to think about the problems that occur, especially if we have to go to some type of, whether it's a hard lockdown or a soft lockdown or what we want to do, when we have a great percentage each period of our students coming and going freely from the building. And so that, I think that needs to be, you know, that's another concern and thought out and, you know, added to our procedures is to, okay, you know, it's one thing for it to happen first period, right? But it's another thing if it's like fifth period during a lunch period, when kids are, you know, you've got kids now coming back into the building, you've got kids leaving the building. You know, how do we handle those type of threat situations? What do we do? Okay, if there is, you know, if we have a situation, go to the extreme, there's an active shooter on campus, but a third of our kids are already in, you know, a quarter of our kids are off campus, you know, how do we react? So those are, I think, questions that need to be discussed with the experts and talked about in some kind of protocols to our procedures, you know.
Marianne, Ralph had flagged me, and then I see you too. So, Ralph, please.
Yeah, I definitely don't have a question to be answered tonight. But I think what would be helpful is, I know you're in the process, Greg and team, looking through all these protocols and stuff. So I think having a scheduled board meeting to specifically address everything, right? Where you tell us, here's what we had in place. Here's what we identified as national best practices because we did a meta-analysis, we talked about whatever. Here's how we propose to reform practice. Would be a really helpful board meeting. Now, you know, the world has changed, and so we have to do this sooner than later. I don't know what a reasonable time is for you to get an honest evaluation of best practices. Doing that, now, you know what I mean. You don't want to react willy-nilly just to say you're doing something.
That's exactly right. And what we see here is a product of analysis for one event or two events.
Right.
But you're talking about something more comprehensive than that. You know, I don't know. We'll have to talk with our team and figure out a timeline is the best answer to your question at this point. But I will say this, as far as the timeline is concerned, you know, we have a few weeks to go this school year. The idea of, well, we would need to have this in place for next school year.
Yes. And so, you know, just report back, you know, after we've talked together and say how much time you really need to do a thorough job here to make a bunch of recommendations, you know, really do that meta-analysis. And then the only other thing I have is when we looked at this in D200, what we found the best practice was, of course, preventative, right, on the front end. And so identifying students who are at risk of engaging in inappropriate behavior and getting them supports immediately, you know, to try to work it out. So once again, not for tonight, but I would like to understand how good we are at that, identifying potential risks in the student population, providing them with appropriate supports, and making sure that we are on top of those potential situations and really attending to the social emotional needs of the students.
Marianne?
So I have a comment and a question. My comment is, I just want to say I really appreciate the summary of findings with the timeline here, in the interest of transparency, having the specific time points when things occurred is really helpful. A lot of rumors were going around, and being able to point to this concrete sequence is great for squashing rumor and getting facts out to the community. So I just want to say I appreciate staff taking the time to go through and sort out what I'm sure was a complex situation and make it visible. So, and I appreciate the, that you've already made some changes to procedures as a result of this examination, and you're planning to review and improve further. So that's all great. I have a specific question, which it is honestly an overlapping question between this and a completely separate issue. And it has to do with advisory period and the restrooms being locked during advisory period. And I know that that is that there have been issues with a high percentage of students skipping out of advisory, and that's why some percentage of the restrooms have been locked to try and stop that behavior. I don't have a good understanding of how advisory functions within the school day and the importance of it, the time of it. And I know that while we were considering shifting the school day later to perhaps half an hour later, there's so much support for that, but the community survey response was saying that they didn't want to do block scheduling, which is one of the ways we might have been able to do this without extending the school day past 3:30. I'd like to understand whether advisory is serving a really useful time function. And I guess I'm just sort of wondering whether it's causing more problems than it's solving. So, and this is in part because I asked my 14-year-old, who's a freshman at OPRF, what is advisory for? And she wasn't really able to give me a concrete answer. So I'd like to have a better understanding of it. So this could be a future agenda item. I don't need it answered right away, but it seems like it affects multiple issues. So.
Go ahead, please.
So when it comes to the advisory time, it's the one time of the day, that 15 minutes that students are not allowed to get hall passes anywhere. So the restrooms during that period, to go back to a point that Sarah mentioned, with students going into bathrooms and possibly engaging in practices that we're not wanting to see them engage in, they are locked during just the 15 minutes of advisory, not the passing periods before or after. The time in advisory was devised to be a non-instructional time where trusted adults, our teachers, were able to check in with students, have a chance to read announcements, have an opportunity to show news scene. It's the time when our state champions, those who get to go to state and qualify, we do drum lines during that time to celebrate them in our hallways so that we're not interrupting instructional time to do so. And then there are some teachers who engage in SEL activities during that time as well. That is not necessarily consistent through every single advisory, but it does occur during that time. So there are teachers and students who report very differently about advisory. Some are very excited. We've had advisory teachers who seniors have given different awards to because they were so excited about who their counselor was during that time. They invited them in and had a little ceremony for them in that space. So the experiences are different for all students, but it is a time that students are expected to be in that space, and we do recognize that there are some students who don't connect in that environment as other students do, and that is something that we're working on consistently to try to make sure that we change and do better with that.
I appreciate it, and I'm sure there's a ton of factors that go into these decisions. So I just wanted to raise the question. So thank you.
Definitely.
Do you have anything? A couple comments I have. I think, my fellow board members covered a lot of the turf. My take on this is, and I spent a few years, like different color hair years, working in safety and security. And so this is what I would characterize as a major near miss. Okay. Which, near misses are great if you can learn from them and improve your processes because you didn't suffer catastrophe, but you have all these signs of what a catastrophe could look like. So That's the way I view this incident. And I greatly appreciate, one is the communication, which is sharing facts, including, where we did things well and where we need to improve, going back to your earlier comments. So when I listen to these comments in here, I wrote down a few words. One is, I hear relationship, and you need relationships, but you can't rely on relationships. You need processes so that when it hits the fan, you can respond and address things, because you don't have time, and that's what I think it shows. You don't have time to play games. So I think you've already identified a number of areas, and I agree with Ralph, come back with how we can tighten up our processes. Fred, your comment, we need to be able to, we need to stress it. We need to stress our processes. We need to be able to handle things in the worst of times, when it's people leaving the building, et cetera, not when everyone's sitting around. It shouldn't be an exercise just to do it, to say we did it. We need to know that we're ready for action. And I think there, as we look at this, some things work, some things didn't. Right? And we've got to capitalize on that, but we've got to, it's our chance to take advantage of that and make the improvement when it was a near miss, from that perspective. And then communication. I mean, I think it's important that we keep communicating what we're doing, what's happening. You can hear the, student safety is such a critical item. Parents, I mean, this is they need to know. And I mean, yes, we love our students, but what are we doing? And so our communication is so critical in this area. So, and then the last piece, which, Sarah touched on and Ralph touched on, which is really what are the leading indicators? What's upstream that might be causing things? Are there any clues or any symptoms, things we're doing that might be, leading us towards that? So it's part of that analysis that you're talking about. So I think they've covered it, but I do appreciate, and I greatly appreciate the work of our police department, and it shows the relationships of handling what could have been a very dangerous, it was a very dangerous situation. So that's it for me.
Thank you. The only thing I'll just comment on, please, said is the piece about communication. And I think one of the things that is easy to do when something like this occurs, and we have done it, is something has occurred and we want to try to get information out as swiftly as we can. And so we have packaged up, this last one is a perfect example. Communication that went out on May 3rd is, certainly has some information in it, but it really has just enough for a lot of people to understandably want more, right? And we haven't done the review to be able to give the type of details at that point that really has the type of timeline that Mary Ann was talking about, and really understand exactly how things occur. And so a practice that we have discussed, and I hear that, I appreciate the call for a thorough kind of meta review and bringing that back later, but a practice that we have discussed that is best practice as far as crisis management is concerned, is to send something out and say, look, this thing happened, all right? We had incident A, and B, just clear and crisp about that. Everybody's safe, or explain exactly where we're at. We are gathering information, and we will get more thorough information out as quickly as we can. Put that holder message out there so people know their kids are safe and that we're in a spot of school activities are resuming, or whatever the case may be. And then say we'll get more information out when we can. That will allow us to, yes, we're going to get questions in when that happens, but that holding message is absolutely critical. So anyway, that's just one piece for the communication side. I'm glad you brought that up. And the rest will be part of further conversations that we'll have on the table. Okay, appreciate it. Thank you.
With that said, we move to future agenda items. And Thank you, Mary.
Yes.
So a few have come, one has come up, which is a follow-up of this topic. So we should name that and put it out there.
And I think it might be helpful to do a follow-up on that policy I talked about tonight that we passed on contracts and contract. We just have a board meeting. on it.
Yes.
So all the newer board members are familiar with that. And we understand what rubrics we could look for, and the administration gets re-familiarized with that. And then we set a time period for implementation. Nothing happens overnight in the administration, and I'm very sensitive to that, Greg, but, you know, having that understanding and getting to the point where it is implemented, I think is important. And then the only other follow-up to that as part of what we did at that time is we went through a lot of the initiatives that this high school is putting in place to ensure that every student's experience is a rewarding educational experience irrespective of that student's race, ethnicity, gender, identity, education, et cetera. So we were going to establish some hard and fast outcomes that we were going to generate for enhancing student experiences. And so for gaps closing here or whatever, we should revisit that, have that policy in front of us and come up with revisiting it. And, you know, I talked, Tom called me about this, it was today actually, but this is not, and I want to make it very clear to the administration, to the faculty, this is not about a gotcha or gee, we set the goal of closing gap A by, you know, 5 percentage points over a 3-year period, and it only closed 2. So aha, you got. It's not about that at all. It's about having a measurable outcome that we can hold up and evaluate how our new practices and procedures are being implemented and whether or not they're effectively getting us where we want to go for our kids, and then having the opportunity to reform practice. If it's not getting us where we want to go, we get where we want to go. So it's not about, we gotcha. It's about, all right, we did these 3 things really well. We've identified this one program, this one routine, whatever, isn't quite working the way we want, or we've identified implementation flaws. And so we're going to go back, rethink, re-implement, whatever. But I think it's important to have those rubrics out there, those outcomes out there that are hard and fast to measure it. It's just that. But I really want to be very clear. It's not about accusing anyone of anything. It's about having the opportunity to reform practice and get where you want to go.
Ongoing conversations about that very topic, most recently, even yesterday. Yeah.
And
on the agenda.
It's consistent with our discussion really about our goals. So
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the same discussion, just having something to shoot. Any other?
Yeah, I do have.
Please.
So end of last school year, we voted on not giving kids incompletes, or they were getting P's and F's, they were assigned by their teachers because we had COVID issue, and I was the center, but it didn't matter, right? So can we have an update on how those kids and how this gender speaking, how the school year has been for the students that were struggling last year? Also those students that did D's and F's, how that may affected them going forward. Is it comparable to them their prior year before COVID? Because F's are not motivators, they actually do motivation. So I want to know how that affects those kids and what the outcome was those coming. I know you can't go too grammar to do expose the child identity, but I think we need an update because we've had this whole school year, right? So we should get an update of what happened to those children that got D's and F's.
Gotcha. Okay, excellent.
And then Greg, yeah, I just don't know what the timetable is for the conversation getting picked up about the later school start time. You know, the note that you sent out sort of said you'd have to revisit given the community feedback, and that's fine. But I'd like to be sure that this doesn't get lost. So do we have a sense of when it's likely to show up to the board as a conversation or a presentation?
So, Marion, I'm not sure that coming to the board would be the first thing I will do.
Okay.
as I stated in the letter, in August, we will begin to schedule some listening sessions where we can garner more input from more families. The thought exchange was not representative of our entire community, nor was it representative of our entire student body, nor was it representative of our entire faculty. So we really think it's important to have all of that feedback and input before we truly make this big of a decision. So beginning in August, we will start those conversations with all three of those stakeholders. And then the plan is to, between December and the very beginning of January, have a decision prepared to present.
Okay.
To not only the board, but the community, the students, and our faculty, so that everything can be ready to be printed in the different books and entities for the school year, next school year.
That sounds great. I'm totally in favor of gathering more information. But that was not the impression I got from the message that went out. And that wasn't I talked to various people who also sort of seemed to think it was kind of like it had been decided that you weren't going to do block scheduling. And so if you're still in a data collection phase, that's fine, but just be careful with the messaging, I guess. So
the message indicated that we would examine various bell schedules. And so educator language in my head, bell schedules is block, late, all of those things. So
but no, but that's fine. I just mean that, like, if you are still serving different groups in the community, I think that's important. That's super important. And so just knowing that, I can be more patient. So thank you.
Okay. I have two items, and they might be out on your list. One is more self-serving for the board, which is a discussion on committees and liaison roles, and do we just keep doing the same thing over again, or do we look at different ways? So, and that's where we spend our time. So I want to, put a few minutes on the agenda to talk to that before we start attacking it. The other one is just environmental or sustainability policy. That one, it's in our goals. I know it's being worked on, so it should be coming to the board in a future agenda.
Yep, that's on our list, and it is slated, according to the board goal, to be completed by June 23rd, which is the regular board meeting in June. So,
right, those were the ones I had. I would like a motion, please.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a special meeting coming up
We
soon.
need to flip.
Yep.
Ready? Let's go. I'm gonna do this. So we're going, hang on a minute.
We're staying in the same room.
Yeah, same room,
Same meeting.
same meeting, same bat channel,
All right.
same bat time. I just need to go to a different board docs.
Yeah.
Okay?
Oh,
Thank you.
Are we ready? Okay, I call to order a special Board of Education meeting on May the 12th at 9:11 p.m. Sorry,
That's right.
am I good enough?
You're good.
And ask for a roll call. Ms. Evans.
I am so sorry, sir. Mr. Arkin.
Yes.
Mr. Henry.
It's here.
Here.
Oh,
It's
there.
here.
Let's have a tea party over there. So. They were-
Ms. Harris. Ms. Spivey. Here. Dr. Maharaj. Here. Mr. Martyri.
Present.
Mr. Thompson.
Here. Okay, do we have any public comments?
None.
Okay. I move to approve the personnel report, including new hires, transfers, assignment changes, summer hires, leaves of absence, and resignations. May I have a second?
Second.
If I could jump in before we actually do this vote, we have 4 such hires in-house today who are here, and they waited through a board meeting for us to get to this point. So thank you.
Stand, be recognized.
Yes. Thank you. I don't know if we want any big speech making from any one of you, but I would welcome the 4 of you just kind of singly one at a time coming to the mic and just introducing yourselves and letting us know the role you'll be taking on with us next year, and you know, any little tidbits from your life story you wish to share. So.
Careful what you invite. Just kidding. Hello, good evening. My name is Erica Eckert. I am a current English teacher here at OPRF, and next year I'm really excited to be serving as the English division head. I'm also an Oak Park resident. My kids will be coming here in a couple of years, so I'm really stoked at the chance to make this school the best place it can be. And I really appreciate you guys listening to me tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Sherilyn Jones-McLeod. I will be the new Director of Campus Safety. Thank you for having me back. I couldn't stay away from you all. It was only a few months. But it was very important for me to be here for the entire meeting so that I could hear the comments around safety. And during my presentation for interviewing, I had lots of ideas that I think that you would be interested in. So together we can definitely make this a safer place. My children go here and I'm a resident of Oak Park as well, so thank you.
Everyone, I'm Janelle Bishop.
In Spanish,
This is my, what was that? In Spanish.
I got a.
Oh, yeah, well,
You are
yeah, so
Spanish.
this is my 22nd year here. I started here in 2000 as a Spanish teacher. I'm rusty, I practice, so don't hold me to it, but I can still defend myself in the language. I am in my 22nd year here. I have worked in the discipline area for the last 16 of those 22 years, and it is with bittersweet emotion that I have accepted the position of the Director of Employee Relations and Recruitment. I thought I would retire being a dean because that is the job I love. But this happened, and I always want to help. And this seems to be an area in which I could help the school in a different way than I have been currently. So I am excited. Thank you for seeing something in me to select me for this position, and I'm excited to get started.
Hello, I'm Latanya Applewhite. I'm currently the freshman sophomore academy leader as well as the IB coordinator at my current district. I have accepted the role of Executive Director of Equity and Student Success for next school year. I hope to be an empty nester pretty soon and cannot get my 19-year-old out of my house.
They won't be.
He won't leave. Soon he will be going to the Navy, I hope, fingers crossed. But I am excited about the challenging work ahead. So I know that it is often a challenge when you are trying to change the hearts and mindsets of people. Often beliefs are because of people's fear, but differences are what make us all unique. And so I am excited to work with the team here at Oak Park Rural Forest, and I hope that I can become an integral part of the work that is already occurring here. So thank you all for taking me aboard.
With that said, so did we get a second? I did. Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Henry,
Yes.
Ms. Darkin,
Here, yes.
Ms. Harris? Dr. Maharaj?
Yes.
Mr. Martyri?
Emphatic, yes.
Ms. Spivey?
Yes.
And Mr. Clausen?
Yes. Thank you. So, no, future agenda items, part 2.
We had that last meeting, so moved.
Can I just make a real quick comment? It's not really a future agenda item, but I just want to congratulate our kind of ex officio board member, Tim Millman. For making such a great.
Thank you. So, now, all in favor? Aye.
And your first prediction is